Jim, can I take you down a very, very quick cul-de-sac here, because I think it's important we get this out of the way now. It is a very important point, I think, and if I don't ask it, I'm going to get emails from people asking me why. You described your academic background. You are clearly a man who's been involved in the business of thinking, very literally, all your working life, and you think very deeply about things. I'm curious to know why a man in your position would want to put his credibility, one, sanity perhaps two, on the line for this for so long, because it is seen by many people as so wacko and way out there that it's something you're potentially going to have to defend as a viewpoint, if you want to, for the rest of your life. Why?
Well, just a short answer and then a slightly longer explanation. I mean, I founded Scholars for 9/11 Truth in December of 2005, and I have been, engaged in collaborative research with physicists, pilots, structural engineers, aeronautical engineers, civil engineers, mechanical engineers ever since. So that the results of our research, including, for example, 20 refutations, based upon extensive research, which are scientific in their character, of the official account, can be found at 911scholars.org in the upper left-hand corner under the heading Why Doubt 9/11, where I elaborate those 20 key points of refutation. And while you're there, notice in the upper right-hand corner that there's a logo that will take you to patriotsquestion911.com, which is a marvelous website, Howard. If you've never visited, you must go there soon, where you find thousands of professionals across many different disciplines, academicians from the physical sciences, the social sciences, the humanities, but also professionals, who are engineers, physicists, chemists, biologists alike, and also members who are past or present involved in the government, intelligence agencies, and military service. So, here you have thousands of individuals where you'll find not only their bio sketches, but their photographs and statements about 9/11, who are convinced, completely justifiably, that the government has been spinning yarns, tall tales, fairy tales, if you like, because the whole of 9/11 was a hoax. It was a staged event, Howard. It was a masquerade for the sake of instilling fear into the American people, to make us susceptible to manipulation, to promote a political agenda, including these wars of aggression in Iraq and Afghanistan, which are in violation of international law, the UN Charter, and even U.S. Constitution. And since the use of violence or acts of violence to instill fear into a population for political purposes is the classic characterization of terrorism, what we have discovered here, and it grieves me to say this, is that the American government has been practicing terrorism on the American people. Now, if you want to know why I have become so deeply involved, the story relates to my having lived through the assassination of JFK. I was a young Marine Corps officer anchored out in Kaohsiung Harbor in Formosa aboard the LPH Iwo Jima, where an LPH is a helicopter platform. Carrier has got a shallow draft, unlike a regular carrier where you need this very firm, long, smooth surface for planes to take off and land, but helicopters, because they have a vertical ascent and landing, don't require that degree of stability. When I was awakened at 4:30 in the morning by the officer of the deck, Fred Rensler, who happened to be my executive officer in the mortar battery, of which I was the fire direction officer, to tell me that the president had been shot. And then an hour later, he awakened me again and told me they'd caught the fellow who done it, who had been a communist. Well, I thought then that was pretty fast work. And, of course, what I know now has confirmed it in a voluminous fashion. But what happened to me also involved lying in bed. In this case, I was reading a newspaper, drinking a cup of coffee, when my wife came in and said, "You won't believe this," flipped on our TV. This was in 1993, in the wake of the release of Oliver Stone's superb quasi-documentary film, JFK, which my research and that of the experts with whom I have collaborated has shown to be the most accurate, complete, and comprehensive presentation of what actually happened to JFK and Dealey Plaza ever presented to the public through the mass media.
So it was more than just good entertainment.
Oh, yes, absolutely. It was being savaged by columnists and commentators long before it had been released to the public. They didn't even know what they were actually literally talking about. It turns out Oliver's film is too simple by half, since he only shows three shooting teams, when actually there turned out to have been six. JFK himself alone was hit 4 different times. He was hit in the back by a shallow shot fired from the top of the county records building that entered his back 5.5 inches below the collar to the right of the spinal column. A shallow shot only went in about as far as the second knuckle on your little finger. He was hit in the throat by a shot fired from the left front from an above-ground sewer opening halfway between the roadway and the top of the triple underpass, that actually passed through the windshield en route to striking him in the throat, where it appears to have fragmented, part going downward into his right lung, another part upward, and rupturing a very tough membrane that covers a cerebellum, a very compact part of the brain.
And wasn't there a story of a magic bullet that went through him at a bizarre angle and then hit somebody else in the car, which theoretically is not possible, they say?
Howard, let me get to it by just adding 1 or 2 more points about what actually happened in Dealey Plaza, and then I'll address it. Which is that then the driver actually, after shots had begun to be fired, after shots had already been fired, the driver, William Greer, was the oldest member of the Secret Service contingent, and who was a Protestant from Ireland, pulled the limousine to a halt and to the left to make sure Jack would be killed. He was hit in the head twice, in the back of the head by a shot fired from the Daltex building, from a closet belonging to a uranium mining company that was an asset for the CIA, where the shooter in this case appears to be have been an anti-Castro Cuban by the name of Nestor Tony Escudero. And Jack fell forward. Jackie eased him back up and was looking him right in the face when he was hit in the right front by a shot fired from the symmetrically located north side sewer opening halfway between the ground and the top of the triple underpass by a person who I believe was an Air Force expert. Hit him in the right temple. It was a frangible or exploding bullet whose shock waves blew his brains out the back of his head with such force that they impacted a motorcycle patrolman to the left rear by the name of Hughes, and who thought he himself had been hit, and where a triangular chunk of Jack's brain that's now known as the Harper fragment would be found in the grass there the next day. Now, this event was such a stunning indictment of the complicity of the Secret Service, where we have found more than 15 other indications, Howard, of the complicity of the Secret Service in setting him up for the hit, that it had to be removed. I mean, no one seeing the limo stop would believe for a second that this wasn't a conspiracy, so that they had to redo the whole movies of the assassination, the most famous of which is known as the Zapruder film.
Yeah.
Yeah, but where a couple of others also had to be edited to conform to it. We know about how this was done, where it was done in great detail. I mean, it's astonishing. In the wake of Oliver's film, by the way, there was such a resurgence of interest in JFK that Congress actually was under public pressure and passed a JFK Records Act that created a 5-person civilian board with a mandate to declassify documents and records from the CIA, the FBI, the Secret Service, and so forth, which the Warren Commission had originally kept secret for 75 years. And the choice of that time span, Howard, is no coincidence. The average lifespan of an American citizen is around 75 years. So their plan was to ensure that when these documents and records would eventually be released, that no one had been alive at the time could contest them.
Too late. All right, so we know that JFK had enemies. History shows us that. Of course he had them. The Cubans, for one. Fidel Castro didn't like him because of the Bay of Pigs, etc. The mob certainly didn't like him because of what he and his brother were doing to them. The Secret Service didn't have a lot of time for him, so lots of potential smoking guns there. But
the more important, and I'm going to return to your question, by the way, because I gave a presentation at Cambridge, as I recall, it was actually in 2008, on the very topic of the magic bullet. So that, what happened is this, Howard. The day of the assassination, the official account was that there had been 3 shots. This was broadcast immediately, even though there had been no investigation. Dealey Plaza has lots of echoes. It would have been, extremely difficult to know how many shots had or had not been fired, particularly when all the weapons, with possibly the exception of the one fired from the Daltex, appear to have been silenced. And that weapon, by the way, appears to have been a Mannlicher Carcano, which is not a very accurate or reliable weapon, where 3 shots seem to have been fired from the location, one of which, as I mentioned, hit Jack in the head, but the 2 others missed. One hit a curbing and injured a distant bystander by the name of James Tague, who actually had blood from his cheek from a chip from the concrete. And the other missed and hit the chrome strip above the limousine windshield. So that when the Secret Service and the FBI concluded the day of the assassination that there had been 3 shots with 3 hits, that Jack had been hit in the back, 5.5 inches below the collar to the right of the spinal column, as I described. That Conley had been hit in the back. A bullet that passed through his chest, broke a rib, exited his chest, hit his right wrist, and wound up in his left thigh. And the third hitting Jack in the back of the head and killing him. Now, there was a shot that hit Jack in the back of the head. And, of course, there was a wound to Conley. But when it turned out that this one shot had missed and the bystander, James Tague, had actually suffered an injury from it, the Warren Commission was thrown into a quandary. They'd already done a reconstruction. They had stand-ins for JFK with a large patch on his back where the bullet had actually hit him in the back. They had a smaller patch in the back of the head where a bullet had hit him in the back of the head. But they had, Conley was a whole separate matter. So now what they had to do was some fancy footwork, which fell largely to be the responsibility of Arlen Specter, who was then a junior counsel, to fabricate this theory that the bullet that hit him in the back, which was well established and for which we have multiple indications, as I explained in the study I presented at Cambridge, which you can access under the title Reasoning About Assassinations. They had to do some fancy footwork and re-describe the wound to the back as though it had hit at the base of the back of the neck, traversed his neck without hitting any bony structure, exited his throat. You see, so now you got a throat wound that was an entry, which you're now going to explain away as an exit, and going to Conley's back. So by making subtle shifts in where they were located relative to one another, by doing a reconstruction using the Secret Service Cadillac instead of the Lincoln limousine, which of course meant it had no forensic significance whatsoever, they fabricated this phony theory where we now know that, in fact, Gerald Ford, who was then a Republican representative from Michigan and a member of the commission, had the description of the wound changed from his uppermost back, which was already an exaggeration, to the base of the back of the neck. But we have all kinds of evidence to refute it that I present in Reasoning About Assassination, including diagrams, autopsy diagrams, and a diagram by FBI agents who were there, the death certificate by Admiral George Berkeley, who was the president's personal physician, who described the second wound as at the level of the third thoracic vertebrae, which just happens to correspond to 5.5 inches below the collar, and to the right of the spinal column. We have the reenactment photographs. I mean, the evidence here is really quite massive.
Okay, so we have to cut to the chase with this one. This proved to you, you thought, that dark forces could be at work in your country, and this, by the sounds of it, was a bit of a revelation back then to you, as it is probably still to an awful lot of people. So when you believe that governments can do that kind of thing and dark forces can conspire to do that kind of thing, don't you then start trying to find conspiracy theories in everything?
Well, I'm not going out and looking for them, Howard. I mean, it's sort of a drop in my lap. I mean, look, I was working with the best qualified individuals to ever study the assassination. I put together a research group, including a world authority on the human brain, who was also an expert in wound ballistics, a PhD in physics, who was also board certified in radiation oncology, who would discover almost immediately when he entered the National Archives with the permission of the Kennedy family that the autopsy x-rays had been altered to conceal that blowout to the back of the head. And to add...
Understood. I mean, the quality of research sounds amazing, and I want to talk to you nearer the time of that anniversary about this, because that's a whole other mine of information, but I think we need to get it back.
Absolutely correct. When I began to see signs that something was wrong about 9/11, I knew, based upon my previous research on JFK, where I published 3 collections of studies by experts on the case, Assassination Science, Murder in Dealey Plaza, The Great Zapruder Film Hoax, and had given, hundreds of interviews, even produced a 4.5-hour documentary of my own shared or co-chaired for national conference. I knew the government does this.
All right, but what I'm trying to say is that having a background in this, you wake up to the terrible day that 9/11 happens, and you're conditioned to think, my God, there goes another one.
Well, no, I'm not conditioned. It's just that if I look at the evidence, I know how to read the signs. It's like people who are students of tree rings or geological strata. You have to have an expert background to understand what they mean. And because of my background in the techniques of subterfuge, of deception and deceit, including phony photographs such as the backyard photographs, which were fake, the planning weapon that couldn't even have fired the bullets that killed the president, on and on and on, where you can find a nice summary overview in Dealey Plaza Revisited, What Happened at JFK, which has been published as Chapter 30 of a book from a national conference at the University of North Carolina where Theodore Sorensen was the keynote speaker, and where John Thunheim, who had become the head of the five-person civilian panel, the Assassination Records Review Board, that declassified 60,000 documents and records, introduced me at that meeting. You can find a summary overview that puts the evidence together. I don't go out looking for these things, Howard, but if they are happening before my eyes, because I know how these things are done, it is relatively effortless, and I say that compared to the average citizen, for me to discern the signs that we are being deceived.
Okay.